looking at the 2026 supplementary budget and its impact on Sierra Leone's economy and public debt. President Bio, in his New Year's speech 2026, stated that this is a year of action and affirmed, I quote, "As President, I am clear about what you should expect from your government, which includes honesty about our challenges, careful use of public resources, respect for the law and institutions that serve the national interest. With respect to our economy, we will manage public finances carefully. We will live within our means, focus on what matters most, and use public funds openly and responsibly," end of quote. According to the African Development Bank Group, Sierra Leone's government wage bill has expanded significantly in nominal terms, surging from roughly 1.795 trillion old leones in 2016 to 7.6 billion new leones projected for 2025-2026, driven by currency redenomination, general public sector salary adjustments, and workforce expansions in education and health. Now, in page 11 of his New Year's speech to the nation, 2026, President Bio said that economic improvement must be felt in daily lives of people, noting that families should be able to plan better. He said businesses should be able to invest more and farmers should have confidence that their hard work will pay off. In page 20 of the same speech, the president says his government will continue to work on removing barriers, improve access to finance, and create a supportive environment in which businesses can grow and thrive. Now, the president, during the recent 65 years of independence speech in 2026, also stated that since 2018, his government has worked to strengthen the foundations of the economy. Sierra Leone's Finance Act 2026, effective January 1st, 2026, introduces broad tax increases to raise domestic revenue. Now, the key changes there include on tax increases, corporate income tax, CIT, restored and increased from 25% to 30%. Excise duties on fuel and goods, harmonized and raised to 5 leones per litre for petrol and diesel. Increased levies on cigarettes, tobacco products and liquor. Cement excise. Reintroduced an excise duty of 10 leones per 50 kg bag of cement. Import duties raised from 20% to 35% on selected imported commodities such as tomato paste, bottled water and ketchup. That's to protect local manufacturers. Now, on withholding taxes, rental income withholding tax increased to 15%, while non-resident contractor, management and professional fee withholding taxes jumped to 20%. Now, vehicle and vessel levies. It increased annual circulation levies for vehicles and introduced new circulation levies for commercial boats. GST reintroduction. Reintroduced goods and services tax, the GST, on select higher-end luxury goods and services. But now on the flip side, tax decreases and exemptions include cooking gas and green energy, implemented a zero rate for LPG gas-related accessories, cooking stoves, and solar panels to lower clean cooking costs. Termination payments, redundancy and employment termination payments are now fully exempt from employment income tax, removing prior caps and tiered taxation. Now, Budget Sierra Leone perspective on Sierra Leone's Finance Act 2026 explained who pays, who benefits, and what citizens should expect. Now, they say when Sierra Leone's parliament passed the Finance Act 2026, government officials described it as a pro-people and inclusive piece of legislation designed to strengthen revenue generation while protecting vulnerable citizens. Yet, for many Sierra Leoneans, the real question remains, will life become easier or pricier with the Finance Act 2026? Now, the Finance Act 2026 arrives at a time when citizens are already grappling with rising living costs, unemployment, fluctuating fuel prices, and persistent economic uncertainty. While the government argues that the new tax measures are necessary to finance development and improve public services, the impact on households, traders, workers, and small businesses will be felt in very practical ways. A supplementary budget is an extra spending plan a government makes during a budget year. It often adds new spending or records a drop in tax money. The government usually borrows more money to pay for this extra gap, which makes the total public debt go up. When a country needs more money than it first planned, it often borrows more cash. Tonight, we will ask the following. With the 2026 supplementary budget recently presented in Parliament, what is the impact of the budget on Sierra Leone's economy and public debt? Since the first term of President Bio's governance, are we doing well in terms of fiscal policy, or are we already in the web of mismanagement? What are the factors that pose as a threat to our economy as a country? How do we improve on our gross domestic profit, the GDP of the country? But there are also some gains made. Domestic revenue has increased from 14.6 billion new leones to 18 billion new leones. How do we sustain this? Tonight, we will deep dive into some of these pointers and more. I am Fabian Sweel, and this is AYV on Sunday. AYV on Sunday.
Hello and welcome. Please allow us to take you on an everlasting journey of hard-hitting journalism. No spin, no filter, just the truth.
On AYV on Sunday, we ask the questions that many are afraid to ask, and to test the level of sincerity and integrity of the people who have the power to shape our world.
From the bureaucratically minded corridors of power and the seat of the president,
to the deafening voices of the people that actually matter.
What you should know is that ours are not just mere conversations.
They are accountability personified, live, unfiltered, and in your face.
A live audience of 10 persons will also be included in each edition of the program on first come, first included basis.
Hello and welcome. I am Fabian Sweel.
And I am Victor Jones.
And this is AYV on Sunday. Now, in paragraph 30, page 11 of the 2026 New Year's speech, President Bio states that the deep response towards economic shocks is to build an economy that produces more of what it consumes. But some economist experts wonder about the possibility of improving industrialization, or better still, production and innovation, when there are challenges that still surround public debts and crises. We'll just take a quick break and we'll be right back. Please stay with us. Now, in paragraph 30, page 11 of the 2026 New Year speech, President Biyo states that the deep response towards economic shocks is to build an economy that produces more of what it consumes. But some economic experts wonder about the possibility of improving industrialization or, better still, the production and innovation when there are challenges that still surround public debt and fiscal discipline amidst tremendous efforts so far. Trading Economics says Sierra Leone's public debt is hovering around 45% to 49% of GDP, but the country faces a high risk of external and overall debt distress, according to joint World Bank IMF assessments, with debt service obligations consuming a massive portion of domestic revenues. The IMF, on its e-library, says Sierra Leone's public debt is sustainable, but risks of external and overall debt distress are high, unchanged from the previous DSA published in November of 2024. The downgrade to weak debt carrying capacity underscores serious short-term liquidity and solvency vulnerabilities. This assessment hinges on the authorities' commitment to program objectives, including a very ambitious fiscal adjustment and continued access to highly consensual external financing, including grants. Now, the external debt service to revenue ratio breaches its threshold until 2028, and the PV of the public debt to GDP ratio breaches its threshold until 2026. The overall debt service to revenue ratio remains above 100% until 2029. All debt indicators decline over the medium to long term. Now, in his recent presentation of Supplementary Budget 2026 in Parliament, Sheku Ahmed Fantamadi Bangura, who was then Minister of Finance, said that the total debt service payments are projected at 8.6 billion new leones, which is 4.6% of GDP. And of such, interest payments will amount to 6.7 billion new leones, which is about 3.6% of GDP. And principal repayments on external debts is 1.9 billion new leones. Interest payments on domestic debts will amount to 6.4 billion new leones, and on foreign debts, which is 275.8 million new leones. Fantamadi Bangura also stated that the government wage bill is projected at 7.9 billion new leones, which is 4.2% of GDP in 2026, as compared to an estimate of 7.2 billion new leones, which is 4.3% of GDP in 2025, noting that the tax policy measures are designed to protect the poor, support local businesses, address environmental concerns, while raising revenue to invest more in the social and economic sectors. He said these measures are expected to yield 1.5% of GDP in additional revenues by 2027 and improve the revenue effort to 11.8% of GDP in 2026. So tonight, we ask the following questions. The International Monetary Fund, via Trading Economics website, states that Sierra Leone recorded a government debt to 45.20% of the country's gross domestic product in 2025. So where are we in public debt and repayment? In fact, with just few years left in President Biyo's governance, is it possible that our economy will improve to 11.8% by 2027, as projected by the Ministry of Finance? How does the government balance debt servicing obligations with investment in health, education, social protection, and other essential services? What measures are being taken to ensure that borrowing is transparent and it meets the public with the information relevant and necessary? This is AYV on Sunday. In a moment, I'll be back to introduce the guests and start the conversation. Please stay with us.
Where are we exactly?
AYV on Sunday.
Hello and welcome. Please allow us to take you on an everlasting journey of hard-hitting journalism. No spin, no filter, just the truth.
On AYV on Sunday, we ask the questions that many are afraid to ask and to test the level of sincerity and integrity of the people who have the power to shape our world.
From the bureaucratically minded corridors of power and the seat of the president,
To the deafening voices of the people that actually matter.
what you should know is that ours are not just mere conversations.
They are accountability personified, live, unfiltered, and in your face.
A live audience of 10 persons will also be included in each edition of the program on first come, first included basis.
Hello and welcome. I am Phoebian Sweel.
And I am Victor Jones.
And this is AYV on Sunday. I am Phoebian Sweel, and this is AYV on Sunday. Thank you very much indeed for joining me tonight. Welcome to this edition. As I mentioned earlier, today we're looking at the 2026 supplementary budget and its impact on Sierra Leone's economy and public debt. So whether you're listening to us on the radio on 101.7 FM or watching us locally on channel 33 or on DSTV channel 399, you can participate in the conversation by utilizing the comment section of AYV News Facebook page or on YouTube via AYV Media Empire. Now, on the panel this evening, well, I'm expecting to be joined by Abubakar, who is the coordinator, Budget Advocacy Network BAN. But already in the studio, I have Honorable Mustafa Selu, Deputy Chairman, Finance Committee, Parliament of Sierra Leone, and Dr. Claudius Williams Tucker, former President, Institute of Chartered Accountant of Sierra Leone and Managing Partner, Veritas Professional Services. Viewers and listeners, be part of the conversation by dropping those comments on our Facebook page and YouTube page. And at some point, one of the producers would be here to read out some of your messages. Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me. Honorable, let's start with your committee in Parliament. What is your role?
My role as a committee.
Yes.
Yeah, the role of the Committee on Finance is charged with responsibility as enshrined in the Constitution, Section 93, and that of the standing orders, to look into the affairs of the Ministry of Finance and some other ministerial agencies under the Bank of Sierra Leone, the Sierra Leone Commercial Bank, the Rokel Commercial Bank, the former FIU. So one of our key roles is to provide oversights on the activities and the implementation of the Ministry of Finance, and by extension, some other agencies that I've just listed. That's our main role as a finance committee is in Parliament.
Would you say overall you've been effectively doing this? Have you been serving effectively in your capacity and your functions?
Over the years, there are proofs, there are records to show that we have been effective in our oversight functions on especially the Ministry of Finance, that of the NRA, the Bank of Sierra Leone, and these state-owned banks I have listed here. We have followed up on the implementation of the activities on the quarterly and annually. So that is why, as a committee, even at during the appropriations, we take responsibility, we take charge of the entire process in Parliament. When this budget is taken to Parliament, we take responsibility as a committee in Parliament. So we have been effective in dealing with these particular functions because, mind you, Parliament have three key functions, and one among them is the oversight that we are providing for the line ministries that falls under our purview in Parliament.
So you're also supposed to scrutinize what the Ministry of Finance comes to present to Parliament, correct?
Exactly, not just to scrutinize, we even have the mandate to look into the activities of Ministry of Finance. For example,
I just wanted to get that clear because I was going to ask you, when you sit to scrutinize what Ministry of Finance comes to present, how do you compare that to the current realities on the ground for the ordinary Sierra Leoneans and come to a point where you weigh that against what Finance Ministry is proposing to get to a point where you would either take it now to the well of Parliament and recommend its approval, or go back to Ministry of Finance and say, no, these areas need to be adjusted. So take us through the process of scrutinizing what Ministry of Finance presents.
well, Minister of Finance is charged with the responsibility of putting together the entire country's budgets, because ministry do their presentations, they give out the questionnaires to various ministries, and this line ministry put their budget together, they do the presentation to the Ministry of Finance. Mind you, they have what we call a budget ceiling that ministry will give, that this is your ceiling for MDA, for example, trade, this is your ceiling. You work within the ceiling, and the ministry will now present to Minister of Finance a budget within that ceiling. So you have a budget ceiling, you have budget approved, you have allocated budgets. So these are different lines. They can give you a ceiling of, let's say, 1 million millions, and you present, you look at your own activities and you say, no, this 1 million millions is our ceiling given by the ministry, but we actually need 1.1 million, or we need 800. So that's why you present as the budget you presented. And then now the allocated budget now, at the end of the day, that ministry will present to you that this is the allocation after the process, will now be the actual amount that will be going to your ministry for implementation. And the one we've been doing this to scrutinize is that we look at these because, mind you, these budgets are proposals. These are proposals. But these line ministries, they have their variables, they have their mandates, they have what they cover in terms of operations, in terms of service delivery. They look at these key line items, and then they prepare the budget and they send it to ministry. We, in terms as parliamentarians, we look at them line by line and ensure that these particular budgets can fit into this particular activity to be able to give our people a better life. Because, mind you, these budgets is purely funded by the internal revenue we collect from the NRA. So that is why NRA is part of this whole arrangement, because it is where we get this money from to spend on this project. Mind you, like you were saying in your intro, we have a couple of areas to address. We have debts to cover, internal debt, external debt. We have the service delivery. We have the presidential manifesto, the areas we have to fulfill, because that's what we are voted for as a government, to change the lives of the people. So we have to look at all of this and ensure that yes, if we say we are going to spend XYZ on the health, how is that going to benefit the ordinary person in the village in terms of procurement of consumables, medicines, ambulances, paying of staff, construction of health facilities, all of these put together. These are the real services that the people want to get at the end of the day, and we are measured by that. So that is why we look at these line items line by line, and sometimes we make a recommendation to Minister of Finance, so that yes, this is something you've put for this particular ministry, but based on the realities, can we increase this to this? Can we? That is why in Parliament you see we go by vote lines. You see vote number XYZ. You look at these vote lines and you see that no, this amount here is so much. Why? So they justify. So it's about this is about engagement. We engage the ministry, we engage the Minister of Finance and the other line ministries to ensure that yes, these budgets are reality, and that is just the proposal. When we get now to the revenue mobilization, we have the revenue base, that is the NRA, that we really dependent on to raise funds, because that's our own, within our own domain, our own control. Because when we get to the grants from the donor partners, this is something we have to negotiate, because remember, grants go with conditionalities as well. So we have the EU, we have the World Bank, we have the Islamic Development Bank, we have other donors that comes in to support our budget. So that space, the variance between that gap is what we always have the donors to come into as budgetary support. But actually, our main source is from the internal revenue generation from the NRA.
Let me just mention that the producers extended an invitation to the Ministry of Finance. Unfortunately, they could not send us a representative, but the producers extended an invitation to the Ministry of Finance. Claudius, let's look at this 2026 supplementary budget. What impact do you think it would have on Sierra Leone's economy and our public debt?
Okay. Generally, when you set out the budget, the initial budget was set out based on certain projections and benchmarks. And if those projections and benchmarks no longer hold, then you need to revise the budget. So that is the reason for the supplementary budget. The supplementary budget is a revision of the original budget that was presented by the minister at the start of the year.
But that comes because there is need for more to be spent than was budgeted initially.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So now, according to the minister, one of the reasons why the supplementary budget is coming through is because of the shocks that Sierra Leone is now encountering as a result of the Middle East tension, the Iran-US issues, which led to the increase in the price of fuel. However, if you look at the supplementary budget, they have actually reduced the growth, the anticipated growth, from 4.8% of the growth in terms of GDP, from 4.8%, it has been reduced to 4.5%. And also, revenue, internal revenue that will be mobilized has actually also been reduced by about 592.9 million leones, which means that there's going to be a shortfall in the revenues that were anticipated. And as a result of that, they've also reduced what they expect to collect from GST. But the expenditures have gone up. And the deficit has also gone up. And therefore, initially, government plan at the initial budget was the borrowing was supposed to have been 0.3% of the GDP. But now, as per the revised or supplementary budget, the borrowing is now about 4.4%, which has increased. So they're going to be borrowing locally around 4.2% from the commercial banks, and they will also have external borrowings as well. So in totality, the supplementary budget means that government revenue has actually come down, government expenditure has gone up, the deficit has increased, and the borrowing has also increased. And added to that, the anticipated growth that they were expecting from 4.8% has now been revised downwards to 4.5%.
The interpretation of that for the ordinary Sierra Leonean, what will this mean for them?
Well, it means...
For citizens generally?
Well, it means this growth factor is an economic indicator. And that is where you have a kind of a mismatch between what is actually happening in terms of the economic numbers and the reality on the ground. So if you ask the average Sierra Leonean, they are not actually feeling this increase in the economy. But in actual fact, the increase in the economy, in the GDP, is actually coming as a result of increase in mining exports. So there's an increase in iron ore, bauxite, and all these mineral exports have increased. So because mineral exports have increased, so obviously the production of the economy has increased by that amount. But in reality, the ordinary man is not actually feeling the increase. Now, what we feel as the ordinary citizens would be the parameters that actually impact on the citizenry. So, for example, if government decides to borrow heavily, it means the cost of debt will go up. It means the private sector will not be able to access finance because the banks will more be akin to lend to government than to lend to the private sector. And so when that happens, there will be a contraction in the economy in terms of the business sector. Because if the private sector cannot access finance to expand, then the private sector will contract. So that is the issues that are there. And then obviously interest rates go up.
Realistically, would this, again, for the ordinary Sierra Leoneans, the figures, the projection, it's as beautiful as it impacts their lives. Would this take us to a point where things would become perhaps cheaper or pricier?
There are two issues here. One, because of the increase in the price of fuel, inflation has increased. And when inflation increases, the prices of goods and services also increase. And so that is where the ordinary man is affected. So the increase in fuel price means transportation prices have gone up. The prices of food has gone up because of all of this impact, and prices of services have also gone up. So therefore, the disposable income that is left with the ordinary man has reduced tremendously because of the increases in prices of goods and services that the ordinary man, the ordinary Sierra Leonean, will consume. So as a result of that, the increase in inflation is negatively impacting on the citizenry.
Abubakar, thanks for joining us. So I had a conversation with an economist, and the person was saying, it seems government is projecting the burden on the final consumers with this bill instead of reducing non-statutory expenditure and adopting stronger fiscal policy.
What bill are they referring to?
So the finance bill, we're looking at the supplementary budget that not long ago Minister of Finance, Fantamadi, presented in Parliament as well.
Well, there are two different things here. Firstly, when we look at the Finance Act, which was passed in late last year for the whole of 2026, it provides a lot of basis for various taxes. And of course, taxes are a very important component in terms of government revenue. And if government is unable to collect tax to provide the basic services, there will be problem in the country. Just imagine, for example, government is not able to generate tax and the police stop working for just one day, the kind of anarchy it will create in the country. But apart from that, we, from our own perspective, we believe that some taxes need to really be looked into, not only from the perspective of the rates, but also from the perspective of the operationalization of those taxes in terms of the fairness of administering those taxes.
Which specific ones do you pinpoint as,
for example,
as a team?
If you look at, for example, the GSTs, we have a lot of businesses in the countries that meet the threshold. But how many GST machines do we have? They're small. We are happy. We saw in the supplementary budget, they say they're going to procure 10,000, which is still small. You know, we just completed the tax perception survey, and it's clear that it creates some sort of fairness. There's a big business here which has a threshold, it has the GST machine. Another business close by doesn't have the GST machine. So because that one has the GST machine, they're going to sell at a more higher 15% than the one that doesn't have the GST machine. So it's good they pronounce that they're going to procure 10,000, but that is still small. We should ensure that each and every businesses that reach the threshold operates the GST machine. That's one aspect. The other aspect has to do with an area where we also lose this revenue, but has to do with tax exemptions. You know, we quite recently, the start of this year, we did a study called Eating Twice, in the sense that entities that do have tax exemptions, they are benefiting from a lot of exemptions. But also, the taxes they are supposed to pay, which are not exempted, they are not paying. So government is losing twice. So again, this is another area again government need to look into. And if you look at those that are granted the exemption, they are mainly the bigger companies. The smaller businesses, the women entrepreneurs, they don't get those exemptions. So it's another area that has to really be looked into in terms of ensuring that there is fairness in how it is being administered, and there is transparency in that particular directions. We saw, again, in the Finance Act, some good aspect of it that has to do with the cooking gas, the gas. They removed the GST. But again, this is my concern, and I'm happy.
The argument on that could be it's an incentive to actually promote clean cooking,
No, I agree.
as well as we're dealing with climate-related
I
issues.
agree totally, but let's look at the implication of it. Mostly, we do pronounce some policies without looking at the implication or the cost-benefit analysis. Let me give you one example. Some time back, government removed the GST for all aviation in industries. The pretext was for the price of ticket to go down. But what happened? So even though that exemption is there, the price of tickets still doesn't come down. It still goes up. So I'm happy they removed that one. But again, it is the same thing for that one. We were expecting, but I'm sure maybe for now they will put up the argument, say it's because of the war. Maybe we might show some understanding. But we were expecting that because there is no GST now in those cooking gases, normal situation, we expect the price to remain normal or not to go up. But what happened, I have not done the statistics yet. We've seen it move from 460 for that big one, which I normally buy, to 550.
To the ordinary man,
I support the policy.
The question remains, with all the adjustments in taxes, tax exemptions, reductions here and there, if it doesn't trickle down to their purchasing power and the reduction of prices, or even if not a reduction, but maintaining the prices as they are, it begs the question, what's the point? Why do it anyway if the citizens would still get to a point where they continue to purchase things either at the same price or at higher rates? What impact does it make?
No, the fact is, we just have to still continue to collect taxes to run the state. However, in the case...
Now, this question comes to the example you're making about, clean energy, the taxes that are being adjusted. If the prices remain the same for the citizens, it probably could not bother many citizens, become a burden, but to a point where the prices would still have to go up. And there's adjustment in the taxes for the people who do the businesses. What point does it make to the ordinary man?
I agree with you. In fact, this is something I started raising to some of my NRA friends, that we need to look at these things. We have provided as a country these exemptions that they should not pay GST. It's fine. It's to ensure that more people go into clean cooking gas, which is absolutely good, which we absolutely support. But again, we need to look at the cost. And for me, my own suggestion is we should start to look at it like the way they do the pricing formula for rice. Let's try to understand what the cost of bringing those items, the cost of procuring them. So whatever policy we are making, then we'll be able to track their prices in such a way that the business will not bear benefit. For now, we have not yet done an analysis in terms of how much they are actually purchasing and what the impact of the war on those gases. If there is a severe impact, they will justify the price of increase. But I see that the cooking gas has gone up. But we are yet to know whether the prices are as a relation of the war in Iraq and Iran and US. If it doesn't have that significant effect, then we need to really look at it again, because the essence of providing those exemptions is for the citizens to benefit. It's for us to move to a more cleaner gas so that we can protect our environment.
Yeah, you see, the issue here is, I think we need a broader tax reform. I am 100% sure, even if they bring 100,000 ECR machines, it will not increase the GST that is being collected. Because when you look at the thing from the retail point of view, right, the retailer looks at it from the point of view that, okay, if you are buying a product for 100 leons, right, you add 5% margin there, which takes it to 105. And then you add the GST, it takes it to 100, and the GST is 15.75%. So it takes it to 120.75, right? The retailer looks at it that, okay, my profit is 5 leons, and I'm going to pay GST on this product at 15.75%. And so the incentive to actually apply GST will not be there. Now, some countries, I will not talk about the UK because the UK is developed, but in Ghana, what they have done is they have created what you call a retail scheme. So we don't want to know how much GST you pay when you buy the product, but you charge a flat rate, let me say 5%. Right? So then it becomes easy. Every retailer will charge 5%. So that retailer will not say, I don't have the GST machine, so my price is going to be lower. This one, because I'm charging GST, my price is going to be high. Because at times, the GST is more than the margin they make on the product. And so that creates a problem. So you need a kind of a reform on this GST thing. So you bring 100,000 GST ECR machines will not solve the problem. What we need is a kind of a reform, right? And then also, you realize that the ministries are not talking to each other. So last year, there was a levy on hotels, right? The tourism industry is in an infancy stage. It has not even grown. The tourists have not even started to come, and you are now charging a levy on hotel. So you are driving everybody away. The new one is, under the supplementary budget, they're going to now extend that circulation levy that they now charge on vehicles and Okadas and all of these things on boats. When you consider how much you buy a ticket to go to Lungi from here is $50, and now you add circulation levy on that one. To take a boat from here to Guinea, I think it's $100, right? So when you add how much you pay, $100 to and fro, $200 plus almost 50% discount on the price of ticket that you buy in Guinea to here, what happens? Everybody's going to Guinea. Everybody's flying out of Guinea now.
So Claudius, put this on a scale. Between the way we're running the country in terms of the taxations we're increasing here and there versus the fiscal policy and how it's rolled out, where do you think the problem lies?
I think we are just looking at revenue, how much revenue we can raise. We're not looking at how we can develop the economy. If we have a plan to develop our tourism sector, our visited places, some countries, even in the Gambia here, for a year, they have more than 5 million tourists that come in. If you have 3 million tourists that are coming into Sierra Leone, number one, the impact will be when they come, they spend money. The hotels will be full. Our people who sell handicrafts and all of these things will have patronage. The transport sector will boom and everything. Then you can now think of charging a levy on tourism, a tourism levy. But the tourists have not even started coming, and you are now charging tourism levy. So you are driving them away. Now, if you now charge the circulation levy on boats to take you to it's 2%, to take you to Lungi. So it's 2% on the $50 that we are now paying. So when you begin to calculate all of those things, and then you had the increase in ticket. Now, a ticket to the UK from Sierra Leone, the cheapest you can get is between 1,900 and 2,000 something. In Guinea, it's 1,100. So when you add the 1,100, you add the boat cost is even cheaper than the cost of the ticket here. So we have to be looking at the bigger picture. We've now gotten a nice airport, and you don't have flights that are coming in. Even our own people, instead of using the airport,
But
they
Ministry
all
of
go
Tourism
to...
reports that, of course, because that's their sector, they follow. We've actually not had a decline in the traveling through Sierra Leone's airport.
We haven't gotten a decline, right, based on the figures they are reporting. But those figures should have even been more if we had structured the cost of traveling in Sierra Leone. The cost of traveling in Sierra Leone is very expensive. The cost of a ticket from Accra to the Gambia is cheaper than the cost of a ticket from Freetown to the Gambia, which is half of the distance between Accra and the Gambia. Why is that? When you look at the ticket, the structure of the ticket, more than 40 to 50% of it is in taxes. It's taxes. So we need to look at how we can grow the economy. What we need now is we need to grow the economy. When you grow the economy, automatically your tax revenues go up because of increased activity. Then you have more tax revenues.
Honorable, how do you justify, again, because when Ministry of Finance puts together their proposal, it comes to your committee. How do you justify approving what Ministry of Finance brings? You justify the taxes as opposed to adopting stronger fiscal policy. How do you justify that? Because for some economists, they'll argue it's not really when you increase the taxes. We really need to look at our fiscal policies and adopt fiscal discipline instead of just always increasing taxes as a way of making money to run the government. So how do you justify this?
Thank you very much. I'm lost a bit because before I come to your point, I am just Dr. Pelagius Tucker. Yes, he's talking about figures here that I'm lost because I don't know where he's picking them from. He's a doctor, he's an academic, he's a doctor, but for me, these figures are not realistic figures. To be very sincere, to be very honest. The figures he has just talked about the growth rates, the decrease in growth rates, the decrease. If you go to this document, the one that they presented to Parliament here, if you go to page 2, paragraph 9, if you read, where the minister talked about the domestic revenue increase 10.7% of GDP in 2025 from 10.1%. These are I just want to, and the lending decreased from 17.4% of GDP from 18.7%. So the lending, the decrease in lending is over almost 2%, and the domestic revenue is 10.7% in 2025, for example. So as opposed to that of 10.1%. So you see, it has grown like 0.6%. But let me come to the supplementary. The supplementary budget is not just coming as a result of because we want to spend money. It's a constitutional mandate as enshrined in the National Constitution, Section 112 of the Constitution. And also it's in Sub-Regulation 1 of 25 of the Public Financial Management Regulation 2018 provides for that it requires, due to annual natural disasters, epidemic or illness or other significant and unforeseen economic and financial events, B, can be financed by the increase in the revenue other than domestic or external borrowing. So the issue about supplementary budget is not just because of this shock, but it's a mandate, it's constitutional, and the Minister of Finance brought this as a way of to able to expend more money than what was initially approved by Parliament in December. So now,
Honorable, the question is not whether or not this is constitutional.
I am coming to that.
The question is how you justify increasing taxes as opposed to adopting stronger fiscal policy.
I am coming to that. Because I am here as an MP and I'm representing the government. So when the tourism industry, Doc was talking about the number of passengers flying. I'm a business person as well. I want to tell you that it's not always, it varies. Sometimes I want to buy a ticket, my agent checks for Guinea. Guinea is way, way, way above Sierra Leone, most of the times. Check, it's on record. It's not always. Sometimes you check for Liberia, Liberia is way above Sierra Leone. I buy ticket almost every 1 or 2 months because I travel and I am a business person. So that one is not just peculiar to Sierra Leone. And let me tell the public and of that we've increased our passenger inflow over the time. Yeah, it has not decreased. Like for example, now we have SL Brussels flying in and out of Sierra Leone 6 times a week. So we have maintained that. The issue of taxation. Yes, tax is not the answer to all of this. But mind you,
But that's what we seem to rely on mostly as a country.
yeah, it's not just Sierra Leone. Across the world, we've traveled. Tax is something. By the time you buy a bottle of water, for example, in the US, where we all look at, to be an example, you buy a tag, they will tell you $1.99. By the time the cashier, you pay the cashier plus tax, 0% or whatever. Excuse me. So tax is a way. It's one of the means of generating a revenue. It's normal. It's normal across the globe. Yeah. So to the point that you're talking about tax and that of the fiscal discipline, yes, it's because of the fiscal discipline or the prudent financial management system that we've instituted. That's why you have seen. Doc knows that he has spent more years in Sierra Leone or on Earth than all of us here. Before this time, these essential commodities, you don't see them in the markets, in the shops. They were black markets. But now, at least, in the minister presented in his submission to Parliament, the former Minister of Finance then, that the government have secured over $60 million just to get essential commodities available for the common Sierra Leoneans. Mind you, the cost of rice has stabilized over 2 years now. The cost of rice wholesales is below 650 to 660,000. It ranges from that. Retail price, you can get 680, 700, depending on the distance. So that has maintained. I think that's something we should applaud the government for. We're looking about cooking gas. Cooking gas, yes, we cannot compare. These are two unequal variables. We cannot compare these two because rice is a staple food and cooking gas, yes, we want to promote clean energy initiative. But that is more the usage of this is more prominent in the western area or the cities. But the rice is a staple food. It's cut across. Even the layman in the village consume rice. So these are two uncomparable variables we want to look at. But let me take you to this point that we have managed this economy to a point that essential goods are available. And we've established or we have a lot of industries now. Go to the far end of Freetown, Songo, for example, that's an industrial area. We are not producing iron ore here. We are producing tomato paste here. We are producing most of the things that we used to import are not being produced internally. So what does that tell you? That is a way of generating more income, and we are not producing most of the things we eat. We've increased rice production, for example, local rice production by 8%. So we are getting there. It's not by magic. We are not here before. We were not here before. The fact is, what we should concentrate on is how these essential commodities are available in the markets. We've not heard about strike, for example, paying of salaries. That's because of the prudent financial management.
Paying of salaries, you say?
Salaries across the board. Across the board. Since 2018 today, we've not heard about any rank of that.
For which sectors? Because as you say this, of course, the medical sector, they have their own issues, the education sector. So when you say we have not heard of strike, which sectors are you referring to?
I am not talking about condition of service. I am talking about paying of salaries. Paying of salaries is quite different. Condition of service is a whole package. You have allowances, you have medical, it's a package. I'm talking about paying of salary, prompt payment of salaries. If you are a government worker, from the 29th, 30th, you start to get your alert on the phone. And it has been consistent since 2018. So these are all measures we're putting in place as a government to ensure that yes, there's some discipline in the fiscal space.
Is this the best we can do as a country in terms of fiscal discipline?
I cannot describe it as the best, but it's it's good. It's good. Yeah, because we are moving, we are graduating gradually, and to be able to reach the point that we can proud of to say Sierra Leone we are on a better footing is the responsibility of all of us. It's a collective responsibility because revenue generation mobilization, it's something that we have to look at critically, because when we generate revenue, we are able to provide basic services to our people. That is key. And we're looking at the internal revenue generation. You're talking about taxation. Yes. I think we need to look at the strategy and methodology in how we collect our taxes. My brother Abaka was talking about tax exemptions. Some tax exemptions, yes. I've been part of the Finance Committee and the PSC for like 8 years. This is my second time in Parliament. I have looked at most of these agreements in terms of tax exemptions. It's sometimes the part of the government bargaining, because we have some concessions that government have to put in come halfway, and these are government contributions in terms of getting to the agreement that they've signed to. You have to own to those agreements. So most of the tax exemptions, yes, we've looked at the tax exemptions. We need to have a rethink and a review around that. I agree with most of our agreement, and those agreements we've passed into law that are not commenced operations. We have to look at them. Those that are in operation, we have to look at their investment against that of the exemption that we've given them, because you cannot give a $10 million exemption, then somebody come with $20 million for 4 years. He or she has not invested even 10% of that amount. It's something that we have to look at. I agree. We have looked at so many agreements. We have tax concessions given to business people that we have to look at their investment against the tax exemptions we give them, especially in machineries and some payment of taxes. There is a difference between tax exemption and deferred tax payment. So we Doc here as an economist, and there is a difference. When you talk about tax, the deferred payment of tax is quite different from exemptions. So we have to look at the two to see which one we are really paying attention to. Yeah. So for me, as a country, we are doing our best, and we are moving. We'll get there. It's not going to be a one-time event, but we are moving gradually towards achieving the bigger picture, and we are going towards that end. But I really wanted us to look at sectors, because when we talk about economic growth and projection, we look at sectors by sectors. Maybe that we'll be able to narrow down the discussion to sector achievement, or the variables that are set by these sectors. How are they achieving them, and what are the challenges or the achievements so far they've got since the beginning of the year? I think that's something we need to look at as well.
Suggestion. We'll come to that. I note that you seemed sort of uncomfortable with Honorable Mustafa's submissions.
A couple of things based on what Doc said and what my Honorable said. Firstly, I want to agree with Dr. Claudius that indeed borrowing has increased based on supplementary budget, because the supplementary budget said from the supplementary budget, the budget deficit has increased from 3.8 billion to 4.4 billion. What does that mean? It means government need to borrow now more money to fill in that gap. So in fact, this is one of the areas where we really have some concerns. When the original 2026 budget was tabled in Parliament, we are very happy because we saw the deficit going down. And when deficit goes down, it means government is going to borrow less. And it has an implication. When government borrow less, in the future years, it provides a fiscal space for government to invest on education, on health. Let me just give you some statistics here. And these are real life statistics. For January to June, this year, I'm not talking about other year, this year from January to June, just the interest payment we have paid as a country to the domestic revenue is 43%. And when you take the wage bill to the domestic revenue, it's 41%. So just the wage bill and the interest payment alone have taken 84% of domestic revenue, which leaves government with a more tighter fiscal space to spend on other sectors. So therefore, for we, one of the disappointments we saw is the increase in deficit. We expect the deficit to go down so that that space to invest, especially in future years, will be there. But if you just take, for example, two expenditure area is 84% of the domestic revenue, then it means government, its own fiscal space to invest is tight. So that's why we rely more on borrowing and grants.
Let's go to UN Trade and Development Report. It says that developing economies face exorbitant risk premiums and structural biases, forcing them to spend more on interest than on public health or education. Even so,
it's correct.
There's a huge disparity in interest. Poorer nations face a severe interest disparity in international debt, often paying borrowing costs 2 to 10 times higher than wealthier countries. How can we survive in this reality?
You know, currently the burden on our budget is the domestic debt, because we borrow and we have to pay within a very short time, and the interest is high. If you look at of the total interest we are supposed to pay, domestic interest is close to 90%, while the external interest is very small. So the burden more now is on our domestic debt. And why is the domestic debt actually increasing? It's because we continue to widen the deficit. And when we continue to widen the deficit, we go more into the market. And when we borrow at the market, it's going to be at a higher interest rate. And let me tell you, the Treasury bearer bond interest rate is very likely to increase, because government now need more money. Government go to the commercial banks to borrow more money. And we have now seen the inflation has moved from 4.5 based on the budget to 14.8. So the commercial banks are going to look into all of these issues. So to reduce this deficit, there are a couple of things that need to be done.
So on that local and domestic debt you're talking about, Engage Salon, they've been, actively utilizing their social media handles on this. Now, they say that Sierra Leone faces a heavy debt burden, with public debt reaching roughly $62.7 billion new loans. That's about $2.61 billion. So it says high interest payments on domestic treasury bills and bonds consume a large share of government revenue, crowding out spending on vital public services like health and education. This sounds worrisome.
In fact, the recent data from
Which report is that?
The recent data from Ministry of Finance, as of 2025 December, our total domestic debt is 73.9 billion, which is 73.9 trillion.
Honorable, you can check out Engage Salon. They've been very active with their publications on this. Go online and check Engage Salon. Yes, you were saying.
Of which the external debt is 69.8 billion, and the domestic debt, which what we normally borrow from the Treasury bond to commercial bank, is 63.6 billion. When it comes in terms of debt in relation to the fiscal space, it's one of the major areas that shrink government fiscal space to invest in other areas. And therefore, to address this, there are a couple of things that need to be done. Number one, we have to do by all possible means to increase our domestic revenue. Because as long as our domestic revenue, it is the way it is now, by the way, our domestic revenue is not enough to address our development challenges. So therefore, we go to borrow. But when we continue to increase our domestic revenue, it helps in terms of increasing the fiscal space to spend in other areas. As I told you earlier, from January to June this year, 84% of our domestic revenue just goes to just two areas. So just imagine the limited fiscal space our government have. So therefore, we expect, based on the supplementary budget, to see a decrease in the deficit, but in the opposite we saw. It moved from 3.8 billion to 4.4 billion. So we're going to borrow more. And they stated very clearly, they're going to go more into the commercial market. And one of the effects, as Doc said, if I'm running a commercial bank, I know government is going to borrow to me at an interest of 18, 19% with no ADAT, I will not bother to go to the other big businesses. So it's crowd out resources for the local business people in the country.
Doc, please justify that when, government itself, as a debtor, government really struggles to pay its debts. There are local businesses who would tell you that they've either had to shut down or struggle to survive because of government debt. So to get the banks now prefer, making funds available to the government rather than private citizens, why would that happen? Why would that be our reality?
Okay, now, the government debt, you have external debt, which is debt that is borrowed from external sources. And the reason why we pay a bit high is because for Sierra Leone, our credit rating is junk. And so when you have a junk status in your credit rating, your cost of borrowing is higher. For the domestic debt, you have the borrowing from the market, which is the treasury bills and bonds, and then you have debt that is arising from suppliers and contracts that have been executed on behalf of government. In fact, that aspect is even a complicated one because the government is not even sure how much is their debt to suppliers and their arrears. And so they have now even asked the Audit Service Sierra Leone to look into that. And in fact, in this document, the supplementary budget is there, that they have now handed over some records and documents to Audit Service to verify how much government is owing to in terms of arrears. Now, in 2024, when government borrowed heavily, the rate for treasury bills went up to as high as 52%. And so obviously, if I'm a banker and government is coming to borrow from me at 52%, and I will borrow to the private sector as 24, 25%, who would I borrow to? I will borrow to government. So banks stopped trading or borrowing to the private sector, and they all borrowed to government. But then in 2025, the government borrowing dropped, and then the treasury bill and the rates actually dropped to around, I think, 20% or something like that. With this new increase now, you're going to see an upward trend because the markets react. It's a demand and supply thing. Now, when government was not borrowing, the rates for treasury bills crashed. But as soon as government starts to borrow more again, the rates for treasury bills will begin to go up because you need to attract the banks to be able to give you money. Now the banks are borrowing the private sector around 24 to 26%. And so if government is going to borrow from commercial banks are definitely going to borrow government above 26%. They're not going to borrow below 26%. So as that treasury bill rate goes up, then what happens? The lending rate will also be affected in a way. So I think the deficit, they need to finance the deficit. And they cannot finance the deficit from the grants that they have gotten because the grants that they have are all marked out. So that difference in the deficit now, they have to go now to the commercial market to borrow.
Honorable, you don't seem to be in agreement with much of what they're saying.
Yeah, because the figures I'm hearing about, these figures, I'm horrid. Like my brother here said, 84% of our domestic revenue.
Let me just clarify. From the reports published by the Accountant General Department, every month they publish the fiscal reports for the states. And from that report, the interest payments, what we have paid, this is actual, what we have paid as interest, plus what we have paid for the wage and salaries, is 84% of the domestic revenue, of all of the revenue we have collected. You can check the Ministry of Finance website. You see the fiscal report there.
Luckily, we have Jacob Tenge Senesi. He's the Deputy Director of Budget from the Ministry of Finance. He just joined us in the studio, but the studio is being prepped now to join him in this conversation. But meanwhile, you can continue your submissions. This is just to mention that Jacob is in the studio. We'll get to him shortly.
I want to, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I want to, I'm still struggling. I'm still asking for evidence for some of the figures I'm hearing. Like I asked Doc is still searching for those figures he pronounced. Because these figures,
are you searching to verify?
I'm not searching.
He has not come to the public to
You say he's searching. He says he's not searching.
Before the end of
this document, right?
It's my turn. It's my turn. Anyway, you know, lending is part of the business environment that we find ourselves. It's globally acceptable. What is bad about lending is the ability and willingness to pay. When you have the ability to pay and you have the willingness to pay, it's fine. My colleagues have talked about government borrowing has increased, but they've not said government have reneged pay. So, if government is borrowing to catch up,
but what impact do you think government's debt? What impact do you think the debts the government incurs has on the people?
Two things. Yeah. Let me. In basic economic terms or principle in financial management, when government is not every day or every morning going to the bank to borrow, government borrows because of certain reasons at critical times. And the good thing, government have always paid promptly its debt. And what happened? Government goes not to any other bank but to the domestic bank, commercial banks, the government-owned banks. They borrow. And when they pay with those interests, what happens? The revenue of those government banks, of those Sierra Leone banks increases. And they now have enough money to be able to support the private sector or the ordinary business people. That's how that's how the finance circulates in the country. That's how we lubricate the economy. So when you have government borrowing, it's not every day. When government borrows and pays that high percentage, at the end of the day, what happens? You have a lot of money inflow, we call it inflow, within the financial system, commercial banks. And the commercial banks now have enough cash to support the business people. There is no time the commercial bank percentage of borrowing has gone to 26%. I am challenging my two panelists here. There is no way. It has never gone to 26%. So let me again make this very clear. It has not gone to 26%. And there are certain variables that determines interest rates. It's not just, one cannot just sit and see it out of hand. There are variables that speaks to that particular thing. There's a threshold to that. And when he talks about, my colleague talked about wage bill. Wage bill, the nominal, let's don't talk in nominal values. Let's talk in terms of percentage. And there's a threshold for on the West African Monetary Fund that talks about the wage bill to GDP. And when you see government has increased salaries and have recruited teachers over the years, have recruited more health workers, have recruited the security sectors. These are Sierra Leoneans. That's the way we manage the economy. That's the way we put money into the pocket of Sierra Leoneans. Increasing number of health workers, over 5,000. What do you expect? Increasing teachers, over 6,000. What do you expect? Recruiting more security personnel, police, military, the firefighters, the correctional center officers. What do you think? If we are in 2017 or 2018, we are at 2,000 workforce. Then now we've increased to 3,000. Do you want the wage bill to remain constant? It won't. It's not a constant variable. It moves based on the number of staff that is being added onto this. It's just like when you add more variable factors to this fixed factor, then you see the progression. So for me, wage bill is not something that we should trumpet here talking, because there is every justification. If there is an increase in wage bill, there's justification. And let's just look at the nominal value. Let's look at the percentage to GDP. I think these are the real-time discussion we should be having here. So for me, the issue of loans or government have done well. You see the fear crisis we are faced with. There has been no time you see queues in this town or in this country for a day, for the rest of the day or two. They say there is no fuel or there is no, we have enough. Government, you know what have happened? Government over
Since when?
Since 2018 to date. And as of recent, when we have the Iran, US-Iran saga, governments have been subsidizing. Let me make this clear to the public. Government have been subsidizing for fuel. So that's why we have been able to cushion the effects. So when people talk about deficit, government is not using this money on the other people, but to cushion the effect of the ordinary Sierra Leoneans. So if you see stability in price,
I'll put a pause to you there quickly. Let's go to Studio 2 and join Jacob Tenga Sesi. He's the Deputy Director of Budget. Good evening, Jacob. Thanks for coming. We had thought that the Ministry of Finance would eventually not send any representative anymore, but it's good to have you in the studio.
Good evening, and good evening to the people of Sierra Leone.
Jacob, quite a lot changed from the initial budget to now the supplementary budget. Let's start with the justification as to how did we get here, because there were quite beautiful projections in the initial budget and now we are at a supplementary budget. What happened? How did we get here?
Well, with regards to the supplementary budget, we had various variables. Of course, whenever you prepare a budget based on the assumptions for which you prepared the original one, if those assumptions no longer hold, there's a need for you to look at those numbers again and see how you can revise them. So the 2026 supplementary budget is mainly for economic interventions, and based on the current issues we are having with the US-Israel-Iran war, you can see that the oil prices keep skyrocketing every now and then. And because you want to minimize that impact on the lives of the people, there's a need for government intervention. Not only that, that one also has some impact on also the energy with regards to the payments to car powers, the IPPs, the independent power producers. Of course, when the fuel price goes up, you expect them to change the invoices which they will levy to government for payment. So as a result of that, government also thought it fit that we also need to intervene. Not also withstanding that, there are other social interventions which government need to also come into in order for us to minimize the impact of that particular crisis, because it's a crisis. We are having a lag effect of the Russia-Ukraine war and also having this new one. So if you blend those two together, it will be cumbersome on the lives of the people. You will see that even across the world, all advanced nations, they've made economic policies in order to mitigate all those impacts on the lives of their citizens. So it's as a result of that that the government decided to really bring out policies in order for us to respond. Not also withstanding that, we had some issues with regards to revenue mobilization. Of course, when you have such things, you expect imports to reduce. As a result of that, the import duty or the import revenue that we get, you will see from even the Parliament, it reduced, it fell down. And as a result of that, we also need to revise that revenue numbers. So we are moving the revenue numbers from initially from 10.5 to now 10.1. So it's as a result of, it's about 0.4% reduction, and which is about 651 million loss by the end of the year based on our projection. And because of that, you cannot spend beyond that particular level. And the only means by which you can have the power to spend, matching up with what you are going to get as revenue, you need to tell Parliament that this is the reality and this is how we want to go. But notwithstanding that, government decided to do some of these social interventions. In order for us to do those interventions, we also need to tell Parliament, people of this country, that this is how we want to go. And because this is how we want to go, we tell Parliament for them to give us the authority. Not also we stand in that. We also took the supplementary budget in order for us to face the economic reality, for us to see the economic reality, in as much as we are trying to stabilize the economy, but there are challenges. So we want to take that message also to the people and tell them that even though there are challenges, the Minister of Finance remain resilient in managing the economy until the time we end the crisis, or the crisis come to an end. So those are some of the things that are really, that led us to do the supplementary budget that we laid to Parliament.
So now, with the supplementary budget, we're looking at total consolidated fund appropriation of about 27.72 billion new loans, correct?
Exactly.
How would these funds be generated?
Of course, with regards to government appropriation, these are government-intended expenditures. Of course, like my colleague started saying, you have two aspects of the budget, or in fiscal profile reporting. We have above the line and below the line. Of course, when we talk about above the line, we are talking about government revenue as against the expenditure. Then from there, you have what we call the financing gap, or we call it deficit. Then the deficit will arise if government expenditure outweigh the revenue. And as a result, we come down below the line, wherein we find the means of financing it. And that happens all over the world. And I think it's only one or two countries that I think is operating a surplus budget, which is, I think, the Scandinavian countries or so. But notwithstanding that, every country borrowed too, because the policies and the programs of government, they are enormous. In fact, they are unending. And what government want to achieve on a yearly basis, much. So as a result of that, you will not say government will not borrow. There is no way government will not borrow. The only thing we will talk about borrowing, how sustainable the borrowing is. Every country borrows. Every country. You had U.S. Treasury releasing their debt number just, I think, one or 2 days ago, which is about $40 trillion US. I don't think any country in the world is matching up to that. But we borrow not for consumption. That's the good thing that we are currently doing. We borrow for investment. Investment that we bring back all what we are investing for either the people of this country, either for future generation, current one, and the future. And we are doing it in order to like improve the livelihoods of the people. So in nutshell, we finance our deficit by borrowing, but we borrow in an economic and judicious manner.
Now, AIDS Healthcare Foundation, they launched a campaign last week, and they titled it the Freedom from Debt Campaign. And they argue that behind every debt statistic is a human story. They're calling for stronger accountability in the debts that we have as a country, to link that to the general public, so the public gets to understand the debt that the ministry is, well, the country is accumulating through the Ministry of Finance, and getting the public to understand these debts and how it comes back to affect the people of Sierra Leone. Do you consider this a valid call?
Of course, debt transparency currently in the sub-region, I think Sierra Leone is on top. And the director of public debt was in Washington not too long ago, doing presentation on debt transparency. And everything about the Sierra Leone debt is online. There is nothing absolutely that is hidden. we publish our debt. In fact, we are currently doing the debt bulletin for 2025. In that bulletin, you will see everything about Sierra Leone debt. The only debt that I think one of your panelists was talking about was the uncrystallized areas, that is the suppliers areas. And when you talk about suppliers areas, if I may clear that one, there are two aspects to it. One, you have those contracts for which MDAs enter into agreements with suppliers that has approval directly from the Ministry of Finance. Those ones, we can trace them in the system, we have record of them, everything. But what the fund or our partners we are pushing is for us to know whether these MDAs enter into a contract or for a service or works or whatever manner, which the Ministry of Finance is not aware of. So they said, let them provide all those information to us, verify them by sending them to audit service, because they are the institution that can verify and say, this one is authentic and this is not. And based on that, we can know the total number of debt stock in terms of the domestic suppliers areas, in addition to what is already being borrowed from the banks, which we are servicing, as well as external sector, external creditors. So the domestic suppliers areas is in that manner. That's the essence why we really sent it to audit service, because the MDAs have supplied so much that us at the Ministry of Finance, we cannot verify all of them. The only institution that can do that for us and get back to us and tell us what is the way forward is audit service. Then with regards to the debt, let me go again to the debt transparency. Like I said, if you look at all the angles of debt, either domestic or foreign debt, is online. And the Ministry of Finance does not borrow, like I said, we don't borrow for consumption.
But
that
how
it has
can
taken
citizens better understand what we're borrowing as a country and where it is directed and how it impacts or benefits them?
Of course, we know most of our borrowing, if that's the statistics they want, I think even if they go to the Ministry of Finance, we can provide those information without even calling us like to say whatever. Because whatever thing we borrow is tied to something. For example, for the completion of the East Side Bypass Road, we made some borrowing. And that's, you will see, in fact, now, the people that are applying that road, compared to the Kisii Road or Frobe Road, you cannot even compare them. The highest number of vehicles are using that particular route right now. Then you also look at the Lumley-Toke Road. It's completed. We have areas. And in order for us to like talk to the contractors, we also do some borrowing to finance those ones. So we do borrowing to finance water, the 7 districts, the 6 towns water project. We also do some borrowing to finance energy, 7 district electrification project. We also borrow to do roads. You can see them. You can see the roads all over the country. There's nothing, nobody can hide about it. And each amount that we spent in each one of those roads, the information is available. And what we borrowed. If you go to the Kurubola towards the going to that Guinea border road, you will see the Pavifort doing some work there. Whenever we borrow to finance that project, it's also online. We have the information. We can provide it. So whatever thing we borrow, the thing that was done for now was Ministry of Finance going to borrow to pay salaries. I think for the past 10 years or more, we've gone far beyond that. There's been any time for the past 10 years, I can tell you, where the Ministry of Finance go to borrow from the banks or from the central bank to pay salaries. No, we pay salaries out of our domestic revenue. And that is one of the good things that is happening.
And on time.
So also, talking about the payments for energy, we do some borrowings to pay our IP, because, you know, EDSA cannot generate the required resources to catch up with the payment or the invoices that are being raised by these independent power producers. So as a result, government also do some borrowing in order for us to fight and pay those invoices, because those invoices, in fact, the nature of them, the more they stay in our books as outstanding debts, the more we pay interest on them. So as a result, for us not to add the burden of interest on us, because
So what's our debt management strategy? Because we always have a debt as a country, whether it's external or domestic debts, we always have a debt. What's our debt management strategy?
well, the debt management strategy is how we keep our debt into the books, or in summary, is how we manage our debt. And the strategy for Sierra Leone, you see, like what my colleague was saying, the debt burden in Sierra Leone is coming down. I think the burden that we had was in the second half of, from June 2025 on to January of 2026. But towards the second quarter of 2026, going down to the second half, you see that the debt burden has reduced. The number of interest that we are paying. And with regards to the payment, which Bakar was raising, if you take the total debt that we have paid so far from January to June, I was just going through the numbers, you take that as a ratio of our domestic revenue. The interest, because when we say total debt, is the payment of principal. That gives you the total. But if you talk about what interest, if you say interest, the interest that we have paid is 40.9% of our domestic revenue. It's not 80%. That's the interest that we have.
No, I didn't mention it before. I said, let me clarify this one.
Let me come.
No. Please, 1 minute. I said the wage bill to domestic revenue and the interest payment to domestic revenue, both of them is what I mentioned around 4. So we are on the same page in terms of the domestic revenue. That statistics I have it is
okay, fine. So I just want to make those things clear because
you've extracted some. You said to just 2 sectors.
No, I just want to present a picture of how the fiscal space for government
these
to
figures are not
invest.
realistic. I'm still challenging these figures. These figures are not realistic. I have challenged.
The information is on the Minister of Finance website. You got it right now, you get information.
You continue to challenge those figures, but also you could bring counter figures. If you say those figures are unrealistic, you'll have to provide counter figures. But just before I come back,
I have them now. I have
Jacob
them.
was making a submission. Gentlemen, please.
I
Jacob, continue.
have the figures.
So let me go again.
Yes, Jacob.
So we have 40.9% of the ratio to domestic revenue. Correct. So on interest. So when you add amortization, or we say principal, it's about 49%. So with regards to the one that I'm talking about, with regards to the wage bill, of course, if you blend the two together, that will take you to 89. Around 84%, which is around that 84, 85.
It's more than
but what I'm saying is that the good thing about the two components that he's talking about, debt service and wage bill. Wage bill, yes, we know that it's high, and this has been the issue, but it is sustainable in line with the international best practice, because our wage bill is around 4% of GDP, 4.2% of GDP, which is the international best practice. You should not go to 4 or 5% of GDP.
You don't go to 7%.
So, since we are at around 4.2% of GDP and we are in the medium term, we want to keep it as it is, and we are within, then we will tell you, in as much as you want to blend the two numbers, whatever, and get a higher ratio to domestic revenue, the wage bill is still sustainable and is within the national threshold and international best practice.
Honorable Mustafa, you disagree with many of the figures. If you say the figures presented are inaccurate, what's the accurate version of those figures?
I talked about the domestic revenue increase from 10.1 to 10.7% in 2025. And I want any member of the panelists here to challenge that in 2025. So that in its sense, I said I insist on that figure wasn't accurate, and this is a correct figure. So that the growth there was a growth from 10.1 to 10.7%. And when you talked about the interest rates plus the wage bill, like I told my brother, the wage bill and my brother from the Minister of Finance has been very clear. The wage bill, I continue saying this. There has been no time that we've not paid salaries on time, and we've not reverted to domestic borrowing for paying salaries. So wage bill cannot be competed. You cannot compete the wage bill plus the interest rate because it's amortized. These loans are amortized.
We'll come to the area of corruption and the role it's playing in all of this, because even from the Auditor General's reports, this you talk about now, the salaries, there are still issues of ghost workers. I have not talked about people. Ghost workers in the system. It's connected. It's connected to salaries. You just spoke about salaries.
Phoebian. I'm not talking about ghost workers or human workers that are alive. I'm talking about payment of the wage bill. I was saying that we should not look at the nominal value, because it should not go above 7% of the GDP, and we are still within the threshold. That was what I was trying to. That was the premise I was trying to build, and we've not reverted to bank borrowing for payment of salaries. So the interest rate on the borrowings, that is what the calculation is 49%. So if you want to add the GDP to that, I mean the wage bill to that, then these are two variables you cannot just combine, because we have not reverted to bank borrowing, and the man from Ministry of Finance has made very clear, good enough that there are essential commodities across the board. You don't have to queue, you don't have to go to black market to buy. They are readily available, and the costs are relatively stable. So if you go to the bank to borrow to support suppliers of rice or essential commodities, you go to the bank to get money to support importers of fuel, you go to the bank to borrow to support payment of salaries, you go to the bank to borrow to support payment of teachers, then you go to the bank to borrow to buy school buses, you go to the bank and borrow to support to buy teacher learning materials, then your debt will not be sustainable. You are just living when the Creman say hand to mouth. But when you take loans for tangible development projects, and those loan repayments are going consistently with the bank procedures and the financial terms that you agreed on.
Interestingly, during that campaign, I spoke about the IAH Foundation, the campaign they launched last week. Some of the concerns that came for some of the members in the audience is, we hear about these loans, but where is the evidence of the reason that some of these debts were taken? Abubakar, would you say...
I need. Can I?
Wait. The evidence. You gave me the floor, and I was trying to make my point.
You have honorable. There are still many things to cover.
Because the evidence,
there are still other things to cover.
The energy we are feeling.
But that question I was throwing actually at Abubakar.
No, thank you, Fabian. Let me just make two quick corrections. Number one, we are not saying loan are bad things. It's one of the fiscal instruments to operate any government in the world. So we have never portrayed that loan is a bad thing. Number two, the context upon which I discuss wage bill is not in that deeper context, like wage bill and wage bill have gone up. I just present some statistics to show how the fiscal space is tight with the wage bill and just the...
But the wage bill has gone up.
No, I'm not presenting... We are not discussing the wage bill here. The context upon which I present that statistics is for us to see the real picture, how tight is the government fiscal spaces in terms of investing on health and education. By just mentioning in passing that, just wage from the fiscal report published by the Minister of Finance. And by the way, I've shared that report in the Facebook link for my honorable and other viewers to watch. I just presented that from January to June, just the wage bill and the interest payments is 84% of net
Gentlemen,
revenue.
you've reiterated your points as often as you can. Let's move to another. Most of the points you're making now, you've gone around just reiterating them. Now, I'll come back to you,
Because they
Jacob,
are
because
important.
you wanted to. They're important, but you've mentioned them already. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And there are other things to cover in the discussion. So we can't spend all the time going around on the same things you're reiterating. That's the point I'm also making.
Thank you.
Jacob, let's come back. I was asking about, there were concerns about the evidence of the developmental activities that some of these debts are taken for. Can we say we are at a point where you can vividly point at the evidence?
Yes, there are. We can point at them. I started mentioning some of them, and you can see. I think some of these people that are raising the concerns should take a move out of the city of Freetown and go to the provinces for them
But
to
is it
see.
always that we have these projects come to fruition? I ask you again, from the backdrop of Auditor General's report, some of the issues that are captured in the report, the work of the ACC, do we always have these projects coming to fruition?
Well, with regards to the project coming to fruition, I think for us at the Ministry of Finance, we finance projects based on invoices sent to us by the various MDAs. Because when you talk about water, we get the invoices through either SALWACO or the Ministry of Water Resources. When you talk about roads, we get it through Ministry of Works or SLRA. When you talk about energy, through Ministry of Energy or EDSA. And with regards to the issue of transparency in the debt, like I said, of course, in fact, every debt that is contracted, if it is bilateral or multilateral debt, they are normally signed between the Ministry of Finance, and most of them are ratified by Parliament. Most of those projects that are being funded through debt or loan, they are ratified by Parliament. And we have evidences of each one of them. That's why I said, let them go to the Ministry of Finance website. Every year that we publish our annual budget, you will see an annex, not only for debts, like say, debt that is taken by the main ministries, but even the SOEs, the SOE loans and grants and guarantees that we authorize on their behalf. It's on our website.
Right.
And with regards to that, there is no secret. The information is fully available.
All right, I'll come right back to you, Jacob. Dr. William Stocker, I'll ask again, the evidence of the debts we take. Would you say we're doing good in that area? We take the debts, but seeing the projects to fruition, the purpose of which those debts were taken, are we doing good in that area? Following up on the money disbursed?
Well, I think that's where the area of transparency comes in. So the Ministry of Finance needs to explain in more detail now that, okay, this road, we've taken X amount of debt to finance this road, we've taken Y amount of debt to finance this road. So everybody would know where the monies are going. But the truth of the matter is, nobody knows where these monies are going. And so there is always questions. Nobody is saying that wrong has been done, but I think they need to improve on their communication, they need to improve on transparency. Some of this information, as he says, would be on their website. But then, how many people would access them on the website? That's another issue. So like when organizations do launch campaigns to deal with these issues, I think the ministry should be able to be in a position to respond to some of these campaigns. And that would improve issues around transparency of the debt.
The campaign I mentioned about AIH Foundation last week, luckily they had representative from the Ministry of Finance in attendance and even representation from Parliament.
The issue of our debt is the sustainability. I think our debt levels are not sustainable at the moment. And is going to go up. With this new supplementary budget, government is going to borrow more because
Internally, the government itself cannot fund itself at 100%. NRA, for example, is a key funding institution for government. It's not always that the NRA meets its target or even surpasses its target. Now, the NRA itself, there are a lot of corruption allegations and investigations ongoing at the NRA. So they justify that they would have to go add to the debts that the country does have.
Now,
What do you think we can do without?
the revenue projections have reduced. They've scaled it down from 22.2 billion to 21.5 billion. And then expenditure has gone up. And so obviously the deficit has widened. And the only way to fund the deficit is borrowing. And the borrowing has to be more domestic at this point. So obviously the borrowing is going to go up. A lot of other parameters are going to go up. Interest rates are going to go up. And currently inflation is also increasing to 14.2%, and so it doesn't look too good in terms of the statistics and how it would impact on the economy.
All right, let's take a moment to join Emmanuel Nyake Momo to read out some of the messages from online. Good evening, Nyake. What do you have?
Good evening, Phoebe, and move straight to the inbox for tonight. Because Bangura Mohamed Lamin says the economy is absolutely nothing good to write home about. Farouk Hussein says the world will never be like before in terms of economy, as every country is financially challenged globally. So anyone thinking Sierra Leone should be an exception will be dreaming. Bondoa Tondone says, dear AYV, in light of the current global economic and fiscal challenges, Sierra Leone must strengthen its domestic revenue mobilization strategy to enhance tax collection and improve fiscal sustainability. Greater emphasis should be placed on broadening the tax base, particularly within the informal sector, including small-scale and petty traders. It has been observed not all businesses are consistently charging the remitting goods and services on taxable goods and services. This raises concerns about tax compliance, revenue leakage, and the weaknesses in tax administration and enforcement. Farouk Hussein says, after this discussion, everything will go down the drain. There will be no implementation. Albert Ekundayo Thompson says, did I hear you say Guinea ticket is sometimes way above Sierra Leone ticket? This is unrealistic. Edward Williams says, how do you expect the Honorable to agree? He is a politician representing the ruling party. Thanks, Dr. Claudius Williams Tucker, for lecturing about the supplementary budget. The last we can take is from Joyce Williams. He says, debt strategy is how we keep our debt in books. Interesting. Vivian Swift.
All right, thank you very much, Nyake, for reading out the messages, and thanks to you, our audience, for being a part of the conversation. We have a few minutes to round off. Let's round off on recommendations. We are in this current situation. It could get better, but what are your thoughts as to how things can improve in Sierra Leone? I'll start with you, Doc.
For me, I think the overemphasis on increasing taxation will be counterproductive. What we need to pay attention is how we grow the economy. Because when you grow the economy, you would have more to tax. And then there is a mention during the reading of the comments that you need to bring in the informal sector, right? Some people play in the informal sector, but the size of their business is not informal. The size of their business is not informal. So there has to be a way to bring everything. For me, I believe that when you reform the tax system in such a way that the cost of evading the tax becomes high, then people will not evade. Because if I comply and the cost of compliance is within a limit that can be acceptable, everybody will comply. Nobody will want to evade taxes. So what we need is, one, we need to reform the tax system. We need to try as best as possible as a country to bring more people into the tax net, and then the ministries have to be talking to each other. Now, for example, the new minimum wage is 1,200 leons, but that 1,200 leons should not be taxed, but is subject to tax, because there is no communication, right? When you look at the tax system, you have 600 leons that is non-tax and 600 leons for allowances. From the Ministry of Labor's point of view, the 1,200 leons is a basic salary. It's not allowances. And so if it is a basic salary, you only get 600 that is not taxed. The remaining 600 is taxed. So the increase that have been given is now subject to tax. And the essence of the minimum wage was to put more money into the hands of people. So our ministries need to be talking to each other so that we have a better system that everybody will benefit from.
Thank you. Honorable.
Yes, thank you very much. As a way of recommendation, I think one recommendation I would prefer here is for us as Sierra Leoneans to be honest and sincere to ourselves and to the country. See the country as ours and put the best interest of the country above every other thing. For every revenue mobilization, His Excellency have just appointed a new Commissioner General, and that Commissioner General have gone to, and we've interviewed him, and we've gone to plenary. He has been approved. A new Minister of Finance has been ushered in as well. So I think during my debate, I emphasized on the need of strengthening the tax basis, the revenue generation, because we have these tax handles. But one recommendation is for us to tighten them. And thankfully, the new CG is a creature of NRA. He started as revenue officer, he rose to commissioner, and now he is the Commissioner General. What does that mean? He is part and parcel of NRA for over 20 years. So he knows everything about NRA, about revenue mobilization. So now we're coming to look at him and see how he can perform, and us as parliamentarians, especially the Finance Committee, who will be on the back to look into the issue of GST, withholding tax, and the import duties. I think these are some of the areas we recommend, and we ensure that we pay attention to, so that we increase our internal revenue generation. So that will save us a lot from some financial irregularities.
Yeah, thank you. I will look at the revenue and expenditure aspects. On the revenue aspects, I will join my colleague. So in terms of, we need to strengthen our domestic revenue mobilization. And one area we need to look at is we need to reduce the exemptions. We did a study last that says the revenue forgone from exemptions, they are like 35% of the domestic revenue. So if we can reduce these exemptions by some margin, it will help to increase domestic revenue. And in fact, it's one of the IMF trigger now for government to start to publish, because one of the issues there was the discretionary transparency around these exemptions. The second one, I'm happy His Excellency the President and the Minister of Finance announced the aspect of a single window at the ports, which will help in terms of reducing the revenue leakages, facilitate trade, and ensure that there is a whole sanity in terms of the way people clear their goods at the ports. On the revenue aspects, I want to skew on one aspect that has to do with government not to focusing on local councils. We see this supplementary budget to reduce transfer to local council by almost 30 to 40%, and we have seen over the years they are just doing 1 or 2 transfers. So I want to recommend that government increased. If they are not increasing, they should not reduce the transfer to local council, as they are catering for the basic needs of people in the communities.
All right. thank you, Jacob.
Yes, before I come with my recommendation, I just want to respond with regards to the deficit or the debt they're talking about. Yeah, so the deficit, or say we are going to borrow more. We are not going to borrow more. If you look at the original and the revised budget that you see, we projected 250 million IMF budget support. But now as it stands, they are going to give up 1.4 billion new loans. So if you go below the line under the financing, you will see that line from 250 to 1.4 billion. So that is actually the money that is going to come. With regards to the recommendations, what I would just tell my viewers and the people of Sierra Leone, with regards to debt, currently in Sierra Leone, we are not at high debt distress, we are at moderate debt distress, so which means it's not a call for concern. But if anyone wants to get information about our debt data, they are available on our website. You can get them. You can visit the Ministry of Finance as well. You get our debt bulletin. You can get them as and when you did them per year. And the 2025 will be out very soon. And with regards to the revenue, as my honorable have said, of course, we know revenue mobilization has always been increasing, but not as expected. But we think with the coming of the new CG, we expect to get more.
All right.
And service delivery will come to the people of this country.
All right, thank you very much. Well, we will end today's edition of AYV on Sunday here. On the panel this evening, I've had Abubakar Kamara, Coordinator, Budget Advocacy Network BAN, Honorable Mustafa Salu, Deputy Chairman, Finance Committee, Parliament of Sierra Leone. I've also had in the studio Dr. Claudius William Stocker, former President, Institute of Chartered Accountant of Sierra Leone and Managing Partner, Veritas Professional Services. And also from the Ministry of Finance, we've had in the studio Jacob Tenga Sesi, Deputy Director of Budget. Well, in case you missed this live session, the program will rebroadcast on Tuesday at 11 a.m. on DSTV channel 399. I am Phoebe Swill, and you have been hearing and watching us from our main studio at the top of Tower Hill on Wesley Street in the heart of Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone. Goodbye.